Hello, Scoopsters.
Hello, fools and ghouls. Here with us today on A Pod Named Scooby-Doo, we have lifelong Scoopster and aspiring Hex Girl first, Hofstra student second, Ellie!
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on, Ellie.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored.
and
Yes, I missed you dearly, Ellie, so thank you very much for coming.
Miss you too.
Thank you.
and I think a perfect way to jump right into it is to ask, we heard a little bit about it in your intro.
Mm-hmm.
Why were you interested in coming on A Pod Named Scooby-Doo? Did you watch it, obviously, when you were a kid? What made you say yes?
Oh yeah, I was crazy into Scooby-Doo as a kid. I had all the movies. My grandmother was an artist and she made me like a headboard of like the Mystery Machine with the gang in it. So yeah, it's safe to say that I was really into it, and I'm honestly really into it now. So
That's great.
See,
That's crazy.
This is why Ellie and I became roommates. It was because deep down we both knew we loved Scooby-Doo.
yeah, it was the vibe. I just knew.
I knew it in my heart.
Exactly.
And so to get right into the movie today, we watched Scooby-Doo and the Legend of the Vampire, which came out in 2003. The animation holds up. It looks good.
It does.
And just to head right into it, we'll start with Kalle. What were your first thoughts on the watch through maybe not having watched in a long time?
This is one of the ones that I watched a lot as a kid because I feel like Cartoon Network used to play it all the time. So I like vividly remember this one and Witch's Ghost being on all the time. So I remembered a lot of it. It was still enjoyable. I mean, the Hex Girls are in it, and I've talked about how much I love them and how attractive the Hex Girls are before. So still holds up in that aspect. I enjoyed it a lot on the rewatch.
Ellie, what are your thoughts on watching it through? Is this one you remembered a lot?
Actually, no, I don't think that, unlike Kalle, I don't think this was one that I watched a lot as a kid. But so like going back to it was interesting. I mean, I had seen it before, like as an adult, but going back again, it was pretty interesting. I hadn't watched it a lot. It wasn't one of my favorites necessarily, but I feel like going back to it, it was pretty good.
Nice. And something I want to point out is, it feels like a different iteration from like the Witch's Ghost, the Zombie Island, the Cyber Chase that we watch, Kalle. Also, the voice acting, something we've talked about almost on every episode, is different from the last one. It's majority of the original, those who were alive in the early 2000s, of the original voice acting with Frank Welker, Casey Kasem, Nicole Jaffe, Heather North, and it definitely sounds different. Did that strike you on the watch? And then we'll get to Ellie because she hasn't been watching the others with us. Maybe you don't notice it. Obviously, Casey Kasem is known as Shaggy to most people, at least before our generation, who knows it as Matthew Lillard. What struck you in the voice acting just off the top?
Yeah, I definitely noticed it was different, especially because the animation is really, really similar to the What's New Scooby-Doo animation. So I was used to seeing this style of Scooby animation and hearing the like What's New Scooby-Doo actors. So it threw me off at first, and especially because we've been watching the other one, so it was different from what we've watched from this time. But I mean, it was nice hearing the original voices. It's just weird seeing it with this style of animation and then hearing like the old voices. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And Ellie, because you haven't been watching the others with us, did this strike you as, oh, those voices sound different from what I remember? Or is there a general voice for each character that you're used to maybe from watching that you remember?
I don't know. I feel like listening to the voice acting in this one, it felt I don't want to say it felt right, but it definitely felt like very nostalgic to me. Like those are the voices, you know what I mean? And Kalle mentioned What's New Scooby-Doo, and I've watched that a lot too. So I feel like they're different like iconic voices for each role, but listening to this, it definitely felt like that was like the original, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and to me too, Velma and Daphne to me definitely sound the most different than when other people take over the role. But I think the little like not an accent, but the indication on certain words in Velma throughout the movie, I was like, oh, you can tell it's a different voice actor, which is sometimes a great thing. Sometimes it takes you out, puts you back in. But I think overall, like you're saying, it definitely makes you feel nostalgic. Also, just because Casey Kasem, and you're like, that's the one, that's the voice, which it just hits the right spot during that time.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt.
Something we've been asking at the start of each one that I'm just going to get out of the way with here. It happened in a lot of early, slightly before this movie, Scooby-Doo movies, where Scooby will look around when someone calls him a dog. He will go, dog, where? In this one, someone says, I've never seen a band with a dog. And Scooby, I rewound it just to watch the moment of Scooby going and turning his head and looking around for another dog. Like there's going to be another dog in the Australian desert. And then just proceeds to play the drums and goes, okay, I guess I'm the dog. The question is, in this movie, Kalle, does Scooby-Doo know he's a dog? We've been over about 8 theories of this. But in this movie, is he aware he's a dog? Because the dingo dogs, too.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say in this movie, he's not fully aware that he is a dog. Because if we're looking at this era of Scooby films that we've been talking about on most of our episodes, he questions every time someone calls him a dog or a hound or something that refers to him being a dog, he is confused. And again, there was a moment like that, not like explicitly where he goes, dog? Where? But he does look around like he does not think he is the dog in question. And it still doesn't make any sense to me. But I'm going to say in this one specifically, he does not know he's a dog. Ellie, what do you think?
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to mix it up a bit. I'm going to say he does know he's a dog. He just has a wicked sense of humor. He just thinks it's hilarious to act like he doesn't know that he's a dog. He wants to like trick everyone out. That's what I'm going to say.
This is a new theory. I like this. Every time we get a new theory, this is new. So you're saying that Scooby is fully aware he's a dog. He is just like a bit to himself that he's like, I got you guys. Like you think, I don't know, I'm stupid.
I mean, I'm going outside of the movie a little bit here if this is okay, but I feel like in other Scooby-Doo media, he's like shown attraction, I guess, to other dogs. So like clearly he recognizes to some degree that he is not like another human. So I think he's just playing with them, honestly.
But he has also shown attraction to human women in other movies.
Well, so, maybe he's just a pervert. I don't know.
Because the first time the Hex Girls appear, which is in The Witch's Ghost, Scooby and Shaggy see them walking down the alley or whatever, and then they both puff up their chests and stand there like they're trying to impress the Hex Girls.
But maybe he's just being a good wingman.
I don't know. I feel like he does not know he's a dog.
All right.
I think I'll break the tie here. I think that moment where Scooby turns his head, I'm gonna disagree with Ellie and say I don't believe in that theory. Maybe that he's making a joke. Well, I like it, but I do believe that in this movie he knows he's a dog, just based on the fact that he takes the cue and starts drumming. If he really didn't know he was a dog, I feel like he would have made a bigger fit, and then the movie would have went insane. It would have been like Scooby waking up in a mental asylum, like as a person, and like it's all a dream that he's a dog. So for me alone, based on that, he has to know he's a dog. Another thing that we've talked about in the first episode we had which was the origin of the Hex Girls. The Hex Girls return, and they return, and the Scooby Gang says, "Oh, Hex Girls, nice to see you." And my heart melted. I went, "Oh my God, that's so nice." It's incredible. Just as the Hex Girls as a whole, what do you think the addition of the Hex Girls to this movie does for the movie? Does it make it better? Is it just like kind of sticking them in there? I mean, the music is similar. They have one new song. Kalle, what about the Hex Girls might make the movie better, or are you indifferent to it at this point?
Well, first of all, the Hex Girls make every movie better that they're in because they're the Hex Girls. I think it helps like tie the other movies together, like with Witch's Ghost, how we're introduced to them there and then they just sort of reappear here. And it's, if you're someone who has seen all of these things, you're like, oh my gosh, I remember the Hex Girls. Like, it's like a fun, I don't want to say nostalgic because these things were made like a few years apart, so it's not really that big of a difference, but I think it's just nice, like, if you're an actual fan of Scooby-Doo, when you know who the Hex Girls are, to be like, hey, they brought back these people who were cool before and now they're here again. And it made my experience more enjoyable. That's why I wanted to watch this episode and do a podcast about it, solely because the Hex Girls are in this episode. So, Ellie, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I have to totally agree with you. The whole reason I actually asked to be in an episode having to do with something regarding the Hex Girls, because I also am just in love with them. So I agree with what you said, though. I think it adds continuity, kind of, to like the Scooby universe, if you will, like seeing different characters reappear. And yeah, Hex Girl, total bop, total banger. So I think that song alone added so much, not only to the movie but to the music industry as a whole. So
Yes, I agree completely.
Ellie, we've talked about this, but I want to know on your end, which Hex Girl do you identify with most? Is there a Hex Girl that you're like, I am her?
ooh, you know what? I feel really bad that I don't know the backup one's name. Which one is the blonde one with the pigtails? Is that Luna or Dusk? I think that's Luna. Is it?
I believe so.
I think
Yeah.
so.
I don't know why, but I just vibe with her.
This is a good answer.
Which one is the most attractive Hex Girl? Because this is
Oh,
also a conversation we've had.
Thorn, definitely, 100%.
Okay, thank you. You're correct.
That's why
Good job.
the general, when we asked this, everyone said, I'm Thorn, I'm Thorn. And I think it's very telling. Everyone thinks, you know, they're the most attractive. They're the lead singer of the group.
No, I don't think I have like the main character complex. So yeah, I would say Luna.
Something that we do see with, you know, great segue you just gave me. Something we do see with our main characters. This movie, the animation for 2003 looks way more digitally based. It gives off definitely less of that hand-drawn look, which in some instances people really enjoy the original classic hand-drawn animation. But I think what it also does is it kind of gives the characters a new identity, maybe. This movie is way less about them as characters and 100% about the mystery of, oh, who's the vampire? Is the vampire real? And we'll get into the end and the reveals, which are pretty twisty. But just talking about how the animation might affect the movie, do you think this movie serves well for kids? Because there's not, like in other ones, adult humor. There's also not as many really witty lines. There's only one I wrote down where Shaggy says, I should send out an SOS, save our Shaggy. And I laughed at that. But otherwise, there's really just constant flow of dialogue. There's really no wasted time in the movie where it's constant back and forth to keep the plot going. Maybe, you know, the beginning where they're on the cruise ship and then they're just having a nice vacation. Maybe that is like the fun stuff. But just from the pure mystery, Ellie, do you want like that pure mystery from a Scooby-Doo movie like this? Or do you want to see more of the character of each person in the gang?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at it from like an adult perspective now, I think we tend to want to focus more on like character and plot and stuff like that. But I think looking at it from like a kid's perspective, like how I felt watching this, I don't think I cared that much about like characters, you know. It was more like the mystery, the fun, like if it's fun, entertaining. So I don't know. I think it depends on what perspective you look at it, but I think definitely like looking at it as an adult, I don't think it holds up as much as some of like the other probably earlier movies as far as like characters and a more, I don't know, thorough plot or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. We're watching so much Scooby in such a short like span of time. It's hard to like focus on one and only focus on this one specifically. But I kind of liked that this one wasn't super about the characters and that it was just a mystery, because for this time period that wasn't really what was happening. And also I like that this one there's like, yeah, they actually solve the mystery and it's not like an actual, I don't know, like witch's ghost where there's just literally a witch's ghost and then somebody dies at the end. Like I like that this one was just a normal Scooby. They're solving a mystery and we already know who the characters are. I mean, yeah, I liked that. I liked that we didn't have to get super into the character development or anything in this one.
Yeah, there's only the moment I think on the beach where all the guys are like, "Oh my God, Daphne," and Fred, kind of blows his top and is clearly very frustrated that people are flirting with Daphne. And aside from that, I think the rest of the movie is really just who is this vampire? What is this vampire? How do we keep this festival band show going on? What I do appreciate about this, though, is there are many suspects for who the vampire can be. We know it has to be someone. And at some points, you're like, okay, is it Jasper? At some points, you're like, is it one of these bands? At some points, are you like, maybe it's Daniel? Maybe it's the guy he's working with. I don't know. Maybe it's his grandfather. Who knows? It could be. So I do appreciate how in this one, there's 100% everyone's a suspect. There's not someone that I'm thinking, oh, okay, they're just the person working with. It's not like when they have celebrities or something like that. It's very much based in pure mystery, pure, is it you? Is it you? Who is it going to be? And so for that, I really like it. Before we get to the end, just on the topic of the Hex Girls still, the Hex Girls are not really a suspect, but compared to the Witch's Ghost, where we talked about that they help out a lot, they end the crime, I'll call it. But in this one, they're just kind of there singing and dancing. So just to go off the question from earlier, which was just really, do they add to the movie? Do you think there's a real reason for them being there other than just fan service? Is there something more you think they could have done or seen out of them? Or are you just happy that they're just kind of there? And for you as a fan, it's just, oh, I'm happy they're there. Because I think as a kid watching, it's like, why should I care about these people?
I think it's just for fan service, and I think it's an excellent addition to the film. The Hex Girls are a band. They're not a part of Mystery Inc. They don't need to help out. They're there to play music and to dance. And guess what they did? Just that. And I was thrilled. I don't think they need to do anything else.
They're just there to look pretty. No.
Exactly.
No, I think it was mostly fan service too. I mean, like you said, Ben, like they didn't really add much. They didn't contribute much. I think, I don't know, maybe the creators figured, in The Witch's Ghost, they were they were involved in the plot and that was their time, and now we're just gonna throw it in as a fun little Easter egg for anyone who saw that one. So, but I mean, I enjoyed it. Like I said, I greatly enjoyed that aspect.
Yeah, well, they didn't really need to help because like last time, where the monster was actually a monster, this time we actually get an unmasking. Not just that, we get a double unmasking. We get I didn't remember that it was a double unmasking. And so I saw the first one and I was like, oh, that makes sense. And then I saw the second one and I was like, that makes even more sense. Okay, now we're here. Now we're doing it. And the newest Scooby movie, Scoob, won't spoil it, similar type of thing, much worse, but similar type of thing. For this movie, the ending, the twisty ending alone, which I personally loved, for kids, for you as an adult watching, does it help your viewing maybe not knowing? Like, you can assume who the villain is, but I think for most of this, for me, it was kind of up in the air of like, it could be a few people here. I think we all know who it's going to be, but, I like the idea of some suspense. What did you think of the end and Ellie, the twisty ending? Did you enjoy it, or was it more along the lines of, okay, cool?
Yeah, so like in my other viewings of like other Scooby-Doo movies that I've rewatched as an adult, I feel like a lot of the time like I can pretty easily pick up like who the culprit is. Like just some of like the hints I guess that they give are so obvious like as an adult. But I think in the case of this movie, like it wasn't as obvious. Like obviously it wasn't like straight out of nowhere, but kind of like with the double unmasking thing, like there was some sort of suspense and some kind of surprise or twist to it, which I liked.
Kaylee?
Yeah, I think it made it more interesting, especially because this one was so like mystery heavy and focused on the solving of it. I think that the twist or the double unmasking thing at the end made it pay off that they didn't focus on the characters more or anything, because it was just about solving this, and then it was like an interesting ending that's not necessarily normal for Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, I also appreciate that they tied up all the loose ends on top of that, because they showed, oh, here's how they made the vampire look like the vampire, and here's why Scooby was able to, when he reflected, why it also disappeared. And so it was kind of like a behind the scenes sort of way in the movie where you're like, oh, okay, they're tying up all the loose ends, and they actually thought about this one. Whereas with some others you watch and you're like, they're just kind of, maybe that's why they didn't have a person behind some of the others we watch, because they don't make as much sense.
Mm-hmm.
The Hex Girls music and all the other music, though, this is a very music oriented film. A lot of like rock, pop punk, 2003 vibes that they're going for, like for kids, obviously, so nothing too extreme. Very much looking like Kiss bands. The music in this one, similar to some early 2000s stuff that I think we grew up maybe not realizing how much it affected us. Ellie, watching this back, did you maybe go, oh, that music, I like it, did it jog something in your memory? What about the music stuck out to you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like it's not necessarily music that you would hear like in anything else, like not anything else, but I feel like it's very unique to like Scooby. Like like listening to it really brought back memories. Like obviously like the Hex Girls specifically, but it's just like it wasn't something that I like consciously remembered, but like re-listening to it, I was like, oh yeah, like I remember this, like the music specifically.
Yeah, I think it just sounds very from that time, 2003-ish. So like rewatching it, I was like, like I didn't remember all of the songs, obviously, but I was like, I remember watching this and this being what things sounded like when this came out. Good times. So I think like that's the nostalgia factor. Like just hearing that kind of music in this movie definitely brought me back to when I would watch it as a kid.
That plus the new animation, the What's New Scooby-Doo style animation, I think in some ways it can make it more memorable because you put it together with this time period, but in other ways it also might make it a little less memorable because you remember What's New Scooby-Doo and maybe not this movie specifically. And I think the reason that this movie maybe has less, to talk about in terms of funny moments or like witty things that pop up is because of that. And Kaylee, do you think that the new animation that kind of ushers in a new iteration of Scooby, kind of a little, do you think it maybe makes it stick out of your head more because it's kind of gets clumped in with both sides?
I think so, because when I started watching it, I was like, whoa, like, because I was expecting it to be sort of in the same, like, thematically and look the same as the other ones we've been watching, like Cyber Chase and Zombie Island and all that. And it didn't. It looked like What's New Scooby-Doo. So it was weird for me to like watch it expecting the animation to like look differently just because of when it was made, and then watching it, and because What's New Scooby-Doo was obviously like really funny and like comedic to watch because they were short episodes and stuff. And so I was expecting it to sort of be like those episodes, but then it wasn't, but it was still good. It was just a weird. It felt like the middle ground exactly between the old Scooby era that was coming to an end and then the What's New Scooby-Doo starting.
Ellie, is this one that you maybe only remembered because of the Hex Girls and otherwise kind of gets clumped in a bit with some of the mid 2000s movies plus the series?
Yeah, I think pretty much all that I really recalled was the Hex Girls and like, vague plot points. I think for me, this was kind of when my interest started tapering off. Like the movies that I remember the most vividly were like the earlier ones, like Witches Go, Cyber Chase, ones like that. So I think, I don't know, for me it just feels like after this point, besides like What's New Scooby-Doo, which I love that as well, but I think I mostly watched as a kid like the older Scooby-Doo. So I think after this point it kind of got less memorable for me, and it just wasn't necessarily what I was into. So
Yeah, it's definitely a harsher turn, I think, to what feels like for us growing up around this. As we're growing up, Scooby feels like it's aimed more at kids than ever, which I think is an indication of some animation at the time. Hanna-Barbera was also going through some changes at the time, and then it starts getting added to Cartoon Network and things like that. So there's a whole generational, I think, divide when it comes to that also. But this movie specifically kind of hits the midpoint where people like us who watch Scooby-Doo are aware of it and know it exists and have seen it. But it hits that weird middle ground of like, yeah, I remember it, but it wasn't as good as this one that came a year before it. Or, it just kind of moves right into the pocket between eras of Scooby-Doo. Talking about that too, the voice actors really only come back for this movie and a few others as we go on. Whereas in the earlier ones, it was kind of changing around a lot. The stability there, I think, also maybe in some ways doesn't help Scooby. I know it sounds weird, and you would think that stability for whatever, whether it be the animation style that stays this way till even now, which they've tried to change up for some series, but I think in some ways it gets kind of stagnant where they get kind of complacent with the way it's at, and they're not really trying to add jokes or anything new to Scooby. And they're like, this works, let's keep it this way. And that sounds a little pessimistic and negative now that I'm thinking about it. But Kaylee,
no,
Ellie, do
yeah.
you think that it maybe ushers in a whole new generation that we kind of now look at and maybe are a little harsher on?
Yeah, that's kind of the thought that I had, like re-watching it. I was like, it feels like at this point is kind of a turning point of it becoming more like streamlined, almost like kind of like mass produced feeling almost. Because I mean, there are so many movies that come after this, and as like more movies came out, I kind of became less interested. Like it didn't feel like anything new, you know what I mean? So I felt like this was kind of a turning point into that where it feels not as special maybe.
Yeah, I think that actually makes a lot of sense. Like, because I remember watching this one a lot, but not because I liked it, just because it was on. And like, I think it's exactly like you said, Ellie, where it just feels like it's starting this new part of Scooby where it's just always going to be, okay, we're here solving the mystery. It's going to take us an hour and now it's solved. Like, there's nothing super unique about this one, and I think that's what started happening after this point more and more and more.
I think this is a perfect note to get into a question we ask on every episode, which is this a good date movie? If your partner picked this out, would you go on a second date? If you're picking a Scooby-Doo movie, would you pick this one? Question's kind of twofold there. I'll start right now and say, no, I don't think this is a good date movie. I think this is the exact sweet spot of just slightly above average for a Scooby-Doo movie. And that's why it's the worst date movie, because you need something that's either really bad that you can make fun of, or something that has adult humor or witty lines that you can make fun of your partner, try to be smooth or funny. And with this, it's just kind of remember this. And I think that doesn't have the same effect when you might be watching it with someone else. You might halfway through be like, is this going anywhere? Or is it just going to be like, might as well skip to the end? Kaylee, what are your thoughts on if this is a good date movie? Because you've been on record and you changed this record last time saying
I
that
did.
every one is a good date movie.
Okay. Okay, are we saying for a first date or just a date movie in general? Because I
We've
would
been
change
going
my
on a first date.
first date. Then no. If this like
Oh,
if this is what you're watching on the first date, first of all, if I'm picking this movie on a first date with someone, there's no chance I'm having a second date with this person. It's just a horrible first date movie. There's so many better Scooby things to watch on a first date that if this is what you're choosing, and if I'm with somebody who's choosing this one to watch on the first date, then absolutely not, because their taste in Scooby is whack, and I am not about to date that. But if you've already gone on dates with this person, you're like just looking for a date night movie to sit down and watch, I think it's fine. Not for a first date, but just if you're just looking for something to watch and like not really pay attention to fully, why not?
maybe for the Hex Girls music alone, maybe that's it. But you just watch the YouTube clip. Ellie, is this a good date movie? Would you pick this out? Or if someone picked this movie out, would you go on a second date with them?
You know, I was originally in the boat of like any Scooby movie is a good date movie like Kalle, but after listening to you two, you kind of convinced me that this is not really the one to lead with, I would say. Like, I would see watching this if you were in the middle of like a Scooby-thon or something. Like that I think is pretty much the only acceptable use for this movie. I mean, I like it, don't get me wrong, but it's not, like you said, it's not really good and it's not really bad. So like I wouldn't see myself even just alone watching this one just for fun. So I don't think on a date, I don't think it would make the cut.
Yeah, maybe for those 5 seconds where Shaggy says "Save our Shaggy," that'd be that I would do. Or for when the Hex Girls sing about voodoo, and I'm like, I remember voodoo from the other stuff. Oh my god! There's also the whole beginning with just Australia. There's a lot of Australia tourism that I was like, am I going to see like whoever from the Ministry of Australian Tourism come out and be like, I'm glad you love it here, Scooby Gang. Everyone should come to Australia. It very much felt like an ad for Australia. I was surprised that there was so much like, we're on vacation. Here's what we're doing. We're not solving a mystery. But even though there was that, there was no big, oh my God, we have to solve a mystery now. I thought we were on vacation, which I'm glad to know that they're happy solving a mystery. That does make me happy. But in that opening, do you think it kind of loses you a bit, Ellie, where it says maybe this is kind of just takes too long to get into, or do you enjoy the just shenanigans of Shaggy and Scooby eating and running around Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like the creators of this just sat in a boardroom and were like, what random place can we just like put them in just to mix it up a little bit? And someone threw like a dart at a map and was like, okay, Australia. So I guess they were like, okay, if we're gonna put them in Australia, we have to have them do Australian things. So I guess it kind of made sense, but it did feel a little, I don't know, pointless, I guess. But
Yeah, I don't know. The Australia part just seems like an unnecessary, I don't know. It's sure it's interesting. Scooby Gang's in Australia, but like is it necessary to the plot or anything to do with this movie? No, this movie could have taken place anywhere and it would have been exactly the same plot wise. So, I don't know. Sure it's interesting that there's like kangaroos and shit in Australia, but I don't know. Just seemed unnecessary.
I do like Fred's add-on though of we're a few miles, I mean kilometers out. And I went, oh, okay. We're really gonna go there. I have a hypothetical question. If you know nothing about Australia, you have no idea it exists, and you just watched this Scooby movie, Ellie, would you want to visit Australia after watching this? Do you think it puts out a good message and really makes you want to travel there and makes you interested in going and maybe sightseeing in Australia?
yeah, I think so. I think I'd, after watching that, not knowing anything about Australia, I'd be like, yowie yahoo, want to go cryptid hunting in Australia? Sign me up.
I don't know if
Absolutely.
Australia is famous for its monsters and ghosts, and I don't know, maybe they have a few Scooby Doo tours there now. I don't know. Maybe this put Australia on the map. Kaylee, would you be interested after watching this? Just if you know nothing about Australia, would this make you turn the tide and go, wow, I need to visit Australia?
Did you say maybe this put Australia on the map?
Yes, I did.
Scooby-Doo. No one had heard of Australia
No.
before this movie.
No one knew what Australia was until Scooby-Doo
Just
went
put
there.
on the Scooby map, I'll say.
If I knew nothing about Australia, would this make me want to go there? Sure.
That's my answer too.
I mean,
Okay.
there's nothing that's like, oh my god, they have that in Australia, I need to go there. It was just
Have you ever heard of a Yowie Yahoo not in Australia, Kaylee? Does that not sound appealing?
Yes. I will go to Australia to find the Yowie Yahoo.
Okay.
And that's it. That's the only reason I will go. I will look up in the mountains, I'll find the Hex Girls, and I know that he's close.
My twist idea for this movie is that they keep the Yowie Yahoo going. And they're just like, we love this because it's attracting people, like without the threat of death or being kidnapped, which is obviously a deal breaker for most people. I would love a movie where this ends with them being like, let's keep this going to get people on. But something I wanted to pose is Daniel Illawarra is keeping this festival going, and his grandpa is like, I hate you and I hate this and I hate everything you're doing and you stand for. And he just he's like, I respect my grandpa. He goes to the tribal meeting, they do the smoke signal, they do a lot with the grandpa, and just there's seemingly no respect for the grandpa's wishes, which at this point, what, four groups have gotten kidnapped, 3 or 4 groups, and it's just like, oh, the show must go on. I found this extremely strange that everyone's just like, oh, grandpa, you silly, what do you know? What are you, a local? What is this just for plot purposes? Is this something that irked either one of you also, that when you were watching, did anything about the grandpa and his son, do you think there's respect there? Or is it just, yeah, I see you, but I also need money from this festival?
I think you go ahead.
Go ahead,
Ellie.
Okay.
Go for it.
I was gonna say, I feel like that's just like a common theme I feel like kids' movies in general. I mean, like, the adult tells you to do something that's probably a wise, good decision. You're like, nah, I'm gonna do the opposite because I want to. So I feel like that's just how things go in these sort of movies. Like, of course, like, it annoys me now because I'm like, are you stupid? Like, use your brain, listen to the person who knows what he's talking about. But I think that's just like you said, just like kind of a plot thing, just moves it along.
But he's an adult too, and that's why I was like, he's not a child, like he's a grown man. And he's like, they're all going back to Sydney. I'm like, then move the festival to Sydney. Why can't you just move why does it have to be at this one area? It literally has to be at Vampire Rock. I don't get it. Why would you put, I was so bamboozled at the fact that he was like, no, I need this festival to happen at Vampire Rock, and that location cannot change, and everyone must attend. Kaylee?
Yeah, it, like a lot of Scooby stuff, if you think too hard about it, it really does not make a whole lot of sense. So I choose to simply not think at all. No thoughts in my brain. I have no opinion on this because I did not think about it, and I don't want to because it won't make sense.
Whereas other movies may make you suspend your disbelief, and something we've talked about, Scooby definitely immediately with the talking dog makes you suspend your disbelief. But with the new animation, and this specifically, it made me believe a little more that maybe they were going for at least slightly more realism in the story because of how they tie up the loose ends. And they're like, here's how this worked, and here's how that worked, and here's how the villains were able to do this, and here's how we captured them with a real trap. Good job, Fred. But like you were just saying, when you start thinking about it more, it really needs you to suspend any questions or hypotheticals that obviously we're going to bring up here. Ellie, is anything else maybe about suspending your disbelief watching Scooby-Doo as an adult? Does that maybe take a little bit more out of you now to not think about obviously I go crazy with it, but not think about little things that you're like, maybe not.
No, I think that drives me crazy. It's why I almost don't like rewatching these sort of things now that I'm older, because it does kind of drive me crazy. Like little things, I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense. And I kind of have to like Kalle said, you just go into it head empty, no thoughts, and that's really the only way to approach it, because otherwise you'll just drive yourself crazy.
Exactly. That's the way I go into every situation in my life. No thoughts, head empty. Never
There
had
you
a
go.
single thought in my entire life.
And
And
this
how's
works.
that going for you?
Yeah.
Look at where I am right now,
Doing a Scooby-Doo podcast. Obviously,
wearing a
you did
Scooby-Doo
something.
hat.
Yeah, you did something right.
Exactly.
This may be the perfect time then to rank Scooby-Doo and the legend of the vampire. We give it here out of 10 Scooby snacks. You can give it your own decimal point placement. Out of 10, we give a nostalgic ranking for when you were a kid when you watched it, and a current day ranking. So I'll go first, and then Kalle, and then we'll end it off with you, Ellie. I think my nostalgic ranking for this is going to be an 8 out of 10 because I remembered the Hex Girls a lot. I remember the villain as much as like a Monster of Mexico, which came soon after, which similar like, ooh, spooky guy in the air. Ooh, chupacabra, ooh, vampire. Like you're familiar with those names, and that stuck in my head. And the What's New Scooby-Doo definitely was like my favorite era, like the most memorable to me because that's when I watched the most. So just for that, I'm gonna put in an 8 for my nostalgic. My current day ranking, I'm going to have to put at a 7 out of 10. 7 or like a slightly below a 7. I'll go a weird decimal point. I'll say like 6.75, I'll say, because it's not something that if I'm clicking on, I'm going to go to in like even in the first like 10 things I see. And that for me alone, like I was excited to watch it, and then as I was watching it, I got less and less hyped until the end. And just for that, if you were like, you have to rewatch this again, I'd be like, oh no, I have to go through, like, even though it's only an hour, I'd say, oh my God, a whole nother hour of that. So for that, I'm going to have to go 6.75 out of 10. Kalle, what are your 2 Scooby Snacks rankings?
For my nostalgia ranking, I'm gonna give it a 7.5 out of 10 because I remember watching this one all the time, but it wasn't ever like my favorite. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was just kind of, I would watch if it was on, but my current day ranking, I'll give it 7 out of 10 Scooby Snacks. Because if I remember correctly, I gave Zombie Island 6 out of 10, and this is way better than that. So it deserves to be a full point above Zombie Island. So I'll stick with 7 out of 10 Scooby Snacks.
All right. For me, I think I'm going to have to be a little bit harsher on this one. Nostalgic rating, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Like I said, I didn't watch this one a ton as a kid, but I mean, I remembered Hex Girls, Australian accents, Yowie Yahoo. That was about the gist of it. So I'd give that a 7 out of 10 for the nostalgic rating. And for today, I would say 5 out of 10, maybe. It was kind of just like, when are the Hex Girls coming back? Like, what is the next scene that they are in? That was pretty much how I went through it on my rewatch. But again, it wasn't awful. I didn't hate it, but it wasn't something that I would, if I wanted to watch a Scooby-Doo movie, all of a sudden I just had, the urge, I would not go to this one, probably.
Yeah, respectable. And, even though the movie does have short scenes, like the scenes aren't long, but the amount of scenes that build up to something takes a while to get to that point. So whereas in other movies, I think scenes may be longer, but they end more dramatically each scene. This one specifically has shorter scenes that just take a lot longer to build up to the clue or something in the end. And that, I think, have to respect that that's the marker of for you, a 5 out of 10. So
Yeah,
Ellie,
I don't know, just wasn't as entertaining to me, I guess.
yeah, and unless there's anything else that struck you about this movie.
Velma singing. How about
yeah.
that? How about
Oh,
that?
Yeah. That was I'm wondering if that's the same voice actor. I don't believe so.
I'm not sure. I haven't looked that up, but
I don't believe
Interesting.
so.
I don't think it is.
But the music, it at the beginning and at the end, slowed down versions of the theme that I was like, oh, I'm feeling this. This is nice. This feels good. It's very wildly different though from like the grunge, like Scooby-Doo, you know, like it's 2000, here we go. So that definitely like more slowed down. I was like, oh, is this like jazz Scooby-Doo we're talking here? So that may be a little different. But yeah, is there anything you liked about Velma's performance?
It's just, it's nice to see her let her hair down, kind of go crazy. I like that.
Hell yeah.
And we know Kaylee loves Velma.
Listen, I'll bring it up again if you're gonna let me do it. Velma in the orange leather jumpsuit in Scooby-Doo 2 live action.
Did that
hot.
awaken something in you as a child?
Hey, maybe. It's very possible that it could have. But as an adult, I can say very attractive. 10 out of 10. Velma is sexy.
I need to put a counter and put a sound effect for every time you mention this. But thank you, Ellie, so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I had a lot of fun.
Even to talk about a bland movie like this, it was still just nice to reminisce about it. Kaylee, let's hear the outro.
Ruh-roh! Looks like we're all out of time here on A Pod Named Scooby-Doo. We'll see you next time.
1, 2, 3, 4.